Welcome to the Reins of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you lead with presence and influence with trust. I'm your host, Marinda Smith, business leadership strategist, sharing actionable insights on mindset, EQ, and energy uniquely illuminated by wisdom gained alongside my equine partners. Today I'm joined by Kelly Wendorf, author of Flying Lead Change, founder of EQUUS, and a powerful presence in the world of transformational leadership. Our conversation today brought together so much wisdom from Kelly, and there's so much more that she has to offer. As I closed off, I was thinking, and I had notes to talk about this, and this, and yet we went down other paths. And so maybe Kelly will come back at another time. We talk about the presence of the world of transformational leadership, equine wisdom. We talk about Indigenous teaching, embodiment and somatic practices, just to help leaders to reconnect with their inner clarity, presence and purpose. And Kelly so generously offers a free entry into her workshop that's coming up in September. It is so generous. So listen till the end and you get all the details. For me, Kelly speaks directly to why I started this podcast, to share how the horses can teach us a different way of leading. And we've both got beautiful insights and stories throughout the episode to help you to become more conscious, more human and more whole. Let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome to the Reins of Leadership. Today I have the exciting pleasure of speaking to Kelly Wendorf. Now, Kelly is remarkable and I can't wait to have this conversation with her. She's integrated equine wisdom, neuroscience and Indigenous teachings, offering a fresh perspective on leadership. And I've listened to many of her podcasts and I've read her book and it's so interesting. And so I really look forward to our conversation today. Kelly, I have missed so much about what you have done. Would you like to share some more about your achievements?
Oh, thanks, Marinda. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to be on your show. And hello, everyone in your world. I don't really have a 2-second elevator pitch, but I'm a mother, I'm a poet, I'm a writer. I've been a lifelong equestrian. I am delightfully subversive to to things that, no longer serve. I am a business owner. I own a small ranch in northern New Mexico in the United States. That is our campus, our learning campus. And I work with senior level executives and lifelong learners and entrepreneurs and visionaries and people who just want to, live awake and aware. They come to the ranch and work with me. But I also work virtually and online with clients all over the world as a coach. And it's a weird word. I don't really like the word coach. It's not really what I do, but there is no other word for it. Maybe midwife, maybe, sacred companion. I'm not quite sure what you call the word, but coach always implies like I'm out there with a whistle, cheering you on. And that's not really what a sacred relationship is like. So hopefully a good company for those who are wanting to lead a life of more meaning and purpose.
Beautiful. I'd like to delve into more about your Indigenous past because I've heard a bit about that. So just in a short summary, not in a great big one, because I know there's a big story there about you growing up in. So tell me more about that.
So super kind of brief nutshell, northern New Mexico, where I was born, was a confluence of a lot of different cultural influences. The Native American population here was not eradicated like so many were elsewhere in the United States. So as the daughter of an archaeologist, I spent a lot of time in Indigenous communities. I was very impacted by some close relationships with different Indigenous people who took me under their wing and was just very much influenced by their by their mindset, by their cosmology, by their worldview. And later, as a Australian citizen, I lived in Australia for 20 years, lived and worked, ran a magazine there, became very close friends with Uncle Bob Randall, who is the listed custodial elder of Uluru, and had the privilege of transcribing his oral teachings and his stories and his message to the world in onto paper, having it published by Finch Publishing, which I think is now no longer in business. But we did a book called Stories of Belonging, and Uncle Bob's words were in that book. So it's just been a thread throughout my life to be a listener, to be a translator, to be a holder of certain, not all certainly, but certain messages that are important, and bring them to the world in a way that people can understand and can bring into their own lives.
Mm, so powerful. And I know all Indigenous cultures have that deep connection to land and to nature and to animals. And
Mm.
so, how does that impact you in the way you work with your horses?
Well, first of all,
Connect. I
when
don't want to say work, I want to say connect. Sorry.
yeah, connect with, well, and we have jobs together,
Yeah,
right? So
true. Mm.
work is okay when we think of our vocation, but I appreciate the sensitivity. First of all, the word indigenous, we often, as white people, can think, a kind of other that word, even if we romanticize it. But we, in our history, have indigenous ancestry, right? So the roots of our understanding are somewhere deep in our DNA, that we have a remembering that we too, our ancestors, connected with fire, connected with earth, connected with water, had languages that did not create objects out of nature or make nature seem inanimate, but in fact recognize partnership with nature as nature itself. So that is, we don't necessarily have to turn to indigenous teachings from societies that are not native to us. We can turn to our own deep, Celtic roots and Nordic roots, and those places that do also point us towards connection with nature. So I think that the evolution of my equestrian life went sort of like this, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Miranda, that when I was little and totally horse crazy and had the riding lessons and wanted to be in what we call play day. I think you've got Pony Club in Australia.
Yep.
Just horse, 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 little model horses. Get me on anything with four legs. I don't care. I need to ride horse, horse, horse. And um but I was taught, and I loved like just the smell and just to like feel this creature like underneath my hands, or underneath me, or just to be in their presence was like being with some kind of celestial being. It wasn't just, oh, like a new puppy. I mean, it was more than that, right? It captured me. And of course, I learned to ride in the very conventional approach. It's what we were taught, kick them, whip them, smack them with the crop, learn to tell them who's boss, and all of that. And there was a cognitive dissonance for me as a child, because how can I do that to this creature? But this is what I'm taught I have to do. So I remember kind of that rub as a child, but I was also an achiever and, kind of type A personality. And so I was just going to be really good at it. And I was in the barns. Back in those days, you could rent horses for an hour, you could have a horse for a month, or you could have a horse for a summer. And back in those days, no matter what stable my mother took me to, they were like, yeah, put her on old Buck. She can ride old Buck because she can just about ride anything. And I learned to be able to sort of handle and endure just about any kind of horse. And I'm not necessarily proud of the way I learned to do that, because it was very power over. It was, and that at some point, there was a little bit of a wake up call, because my daughter She was raised in Australia, and she said to me, Mommy, I want my pony, but I don't want to ride in the way that you ride. I don't want to do it the way you do it. And
Wow.
it's not like I was overtly, cruel or unkind. But from this perspective where I am now, I'm like, oh God, I wasn't listening. I just wasn't listening. I was doing all the talking. And it had to be my way, and I had to be the one in control. And all that ambition around, building the horse's top line and getting them round and getting them on the bit and, all that stuff. So much stress. So I hired someone who was sort of part child whisperer and part horse whisperer to work with my daughter and her pony. And her name is Louise Kropak. She is an Australian woman and an amazing horsewoman. And I watched her work with my daughter and my daughter's pony. And I watched a different kind of conversation emerge that was much subtler, more horse whisperer-ish. And I realized that I just could no longer do my horses the way I had been. The the interesting thing is I had a horse that was very, very difficult, and he had been abused. And I asked Louise to help me with this horse. And it was a massive transformation. And I had to let go of everything I thought I knew and start really all over from scratch. And I had been a professional trainer. And so I had to let go of a whole bunch of ego and a whole bunch of things I thought I knew to meet this horse on a different level. And even that was, even though the requests made to the horse were more subtle, were softer, were more slow. There was more of this like about having feel and timing and attunement and these kinds of words, right? But still, I was still looking for obedience. And again, even in horse whispering, the humans doing all the talking. So the evolution kind of went into a deeper place, and I studied with Frederic Pignon, he's the founder of Cavalia. He does this wonderful liberty work where horses are running around and there's this beautiful improvisational dance between him and the horses. And that was a whole other letting go, because when there is no whip, when there is no command, when there is no treat, when there's no pressure release even, does the horse still choose to engage with you? And if he doesn't, then what do you do?
Mm.
And that was a big, big undoing. But I knew it was the only way I wanted to be with my horses. And so I just, again, dropped everything I thought I knew. Now the horse has full authority. The horse has absolute dominion over what they do or don't do, what they choose. And my job is to be the best human I can be. Am I listening? Am I attuning? Am I not only listening, but am I behaving in the way that tells the horse that I am listening?
Mm.
And am I truly a good partner to this horse? And guess who gets to decide that one? Not me. The horse does, right? And some days the horse is like, yeah, you're not listening. You're not trustworthy. You don't feel safe right now. That doesn't feel clean to me. And some days the horse is, yep, this is what I'm talking about. And so becoming a student of the horse, is really for me where I am right now. And that is, you and I, before we started this conversation, we're talking about, everything being on a deadline, right? And how like relationships can't really form when there's a deadline. And that is so true. If I have a deadline in front of my horse, then I'm not listening to what his timing is. And so I would say that the Greeks have two words for time, kairos and chronos. Chronos is the deadline. Chronos is we have 60 minutes for this podcast, or I'll meet you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or that's chronos, wristwatch time. Kairos is the time things take.
Mm.
So fruit ripens in Kairos. A friendship develops over Kairos. You can't put a deadline on Kairos.
Mm.
And horses operate on Kairos time. And sometimes the kairos is there's a predator in the paddock, we got to run now. But it's present to what the moment is presenting. And sometimes it's, you know, I don't want that saddle on today. And I don't know if I'm going to want it on tomorrow and maybe next week. We'll see. You know, that's that's Kairos. I can tell you like a lot gets done at this ranch and my horses are very talented and do all kinds of really cool things and at the same time nothing gets done. Like nothing gets done. Today I went out to take a horse to have a little spin around the arena and just have a little time with them. And thunderstorm rolls up and they're not really in the mood. And so that is not what's happening. There go my plans. And that takes a different kind of humility
Sure
to meet
does.
that moment.
Kelly,
Yeah.
there's so much in what you just said. I want to come back to when you realized, your daughter realized that she didn't want to do horses the way you were doing them. I'm sure
Mhm.
that's not the wording you said, sorry.
I think it was. Yeah, she said, I don't want to do it the way you do
Yeah,
it.
right. Okay, cool.
In her 7-year-old wisdom, right?
Yeah. And how powerful will that be for you as a mum and the ego? I'm speaking from my own perspective. If that was my 7-year-old saying that to me, I'd go, oh my Lordy, that ego would jump up. So, yes, so powerful. And well done you for taking it on board and stepping back and realizing there must be another way. And then
Yeah.
going and researching and finding someone who you felt was going to help and support in that other way. And then
Mm.
taking it on yourself and learning
Well,
from
you
that
would
process.
laugh because back in those days, all of us in the dressage world, we were hearing on the ethers people like Ray Hunt and Tom Dorrance and Monty Robbit. We were hearing, Pat Pirelli. We were hearing these things and natural horsemanship, and we were all just totally poo-pooing it, right?
Yes.
We were like,
No
this is
way.
just rubbish.
Yeah.
And so when Louise came to work with Mackenzie and her pony Pippa, I'm like spying through the bars of the round pen. Like I
Good.
don't really know if I like believe any of this, but I'll tell you one thing Louise said. She said, and I'm overhearing it. So she's standing with Mackenzie and Pippa, and she said, "So, Mackenzie, tell me, if you want your pony to do something, if you want Pippa to do something, what do you do?" And Mackenzie kind of pauses and she goes, "Carrot?" Like that. And Louise said, "Ah, bribery and corruption." I went, wow, she's telling my 7-year-old daughter about bribery and corruption. Who is this woman?
Yeah, yeah. And the worst thing is your daughter obviously has been through osmosis learning from you. And so
Yeah,
at that moment, if she's sharing something that she's seen you do,
yeah,
then
yeah,
it's like, oh, it's even more in the face. So
it
yes.
is. It
Mm,
is. It was annihilating.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was. It was
Imagine.
annihilating.
Mm,
Mhm.
yeah. And I totally know that period of time because it's really only been in the last maybe 10, 15 years that people have embraced that there's a different way of doing
Mhm.
and having that relationship with the horse. So I'd like to take it back to leaders and ourselves. And when you were talking about at the end of what you were saying, so you were
Mhm.
talking about really listening to the horse, and the horse has the final say as to whether you are listening. When it
Mhm.
comes to a leader of a team, who's the horse?
Oh, that's such a great question. The leader, the horse is the team is the horse,
Yeah, the whole team.
right? And the team
Mm,
gets to say,
mm,
it's the team that says, "Oh, you're a leader,"
mm,
right? Now, I mean, in reality, that's not often how it works. But if you were to kind of really let everyone be honest, it's the team that's going to say, yes, you lead us. And let's define leadership, right? Because from one of the things I learned from my Indigenous friends is how we not only connect to nature as nature, but we also learn from it. So if you look at how the horse herd has defined leadership for over 56 million years, you see that the leader isn't the bossy stallion. It's not the gladiator, showy big horse who throws his weight around. It's the quiet, more contemplative horse that, through their transmission, almost creates a culture of safety and connection and peace, right? And that is the kind of the quieter horse, oftentimes the smaller horse, but those horses know who the leader is because of the conditions that that leader creates.
And I want to share my story on that is, I know from my herd the leader is the quietest and they don't do anything. It's the
Yeah,
energy, it's that
yeah,
it's just that power they have. It's not like they're bigger than or they're flicking their tail or they've got their teeth out or anything like that. They're just
right.
there. And the others go, okay, yeah, we'll do that. We'll do this, whatever. Or,
Yeah.
yeah, we're coming with you. And that's the
Mhm.
beautiful thing. I often ride out in the bush because I've got bush that adjoins our property and I will be on the leader horse. And
Mm,
because I'm on the leader horse, they all follow. And I have
right.
donkeys and horses, and sometimes there's seven of us all in the bush
Nice.
having a cool
Nice.
time. Yeah. Mm.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, so they do, they kind of they exude something. It's a presence, it is some transmission
Mm.
that has impact on the whole. And they're the ones conserving the most energy, right? So they're
Yeah.
moving the least. It's not costing them to lead. They're not the showiest, and so it's always really fun when you're with a group and you ask them to pick out who the leader is, and they always pick out the big black flashy,
Yeah.
guy, or whatever. And it's like, and then there's little Artemis, kind of off to one side quietly, and often she can be missed,
Mm.
or it's fascinating kind of the way that people internalize a dismissiveness to that kind of leadership because we have been programmed to imagine leadership to be something different.
And I
And
think
so,
that
yeah.
relates to what you were saying about the riding. We were programmed to ride
Mm,
in a particular way when we were younger.
mm,
So it's come from years of, we could go down a whole
conditioning.
rabbit hole, but we won't.
Right, right.
And so now it's like we're awakening and we're going, and we are coming back to the way we lived in those Indigenous times.
Hmm.
So we're doing the full circle. We've,
Yeah, we're remembering. We're
yes,
remembering. It's
yeah,
a beautiful thing. And I love the word remember because, and I'm borrowing this from the author who wrote the book, My Grandmother's Hands. He talks about remembering and he puts a hyphen after the re because member is like, we're dismembered when, we're tortured or whatever, parts of our body are taken off, or even the way culture can separate us from our bodies, or we kind of walk around with just our heads. And when we remember, it's like we're also coming back to our embodiment.
yes,
We're bringing the members of our body back, and we're also bringing back our embodiment as it connects to the earth. So I just love that word.
yeah, beautiful. And you're
Mhm.
right, we are remembering it. It is a phase that we're all going through. So as a leader, it's about that pause and that conservation of energy
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
building that psychological safety through trust and so that others will follow and listening,
And embodiment,
embodiment.
and that you walk your talk so that you are that embodiment, and so you do have that transmission. And
Mm,
the other thing I want to say too is that, you were asking who's the horse and the leader in the team. And I said that, the team is the horse and the horse gets to say if they're a leader. In the natural world, if you just look at how nature does things, and remember, we're nature too. So,
mm,
but we've dismembered ourselves away
yeah.
from it. But in the natural world, part of the way the natural world grows and evolves and trues itself, sort of rights itself and brings it into right relationship with itself is through feedback. So if a tree is growing too close to another tree, and then so the shade then robs that tree of light, then that's feedback that tells the tree, oh no, you need to now move more towards the sun. And so it's in order to build trust in a system, we have to be open to feedback. So
Mm.
leaders have to be open to feedback. Do we feel safe with you? Do we feel like we can tell you the truth? Do we feel like we can have candid conversations with you? Are you willing to confess that you've made a mistake? Like all these things that have to do with feedback, because feedback tells the system, oh, we're on the right track. No, we're not on the right track. And that, trust isn't just some feel good thing that people kind of just have. Trust is built through what happens in the feedback process.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
It's so
So,
true. And I was working with a group of people the other day, and we were talking about feedback. Feedback is, my reflection is, we know we've hit the mark when you react strongly. So,
mhm,
yeah, so for myself, when someone gives me some feedback and I go, and it was happening in my riding lesson actually on the weekend, my
mhm.
coach is going, whatever she said, and I'm going, I don't do that. I don't do that. And then I get off and I go, oh, that was strong reaction, Miranda. I think you do.
Yeah, like my daughter, right? Like,
Yes.
I don't want to do it like you.
Yeah.
Wow, that's feedback,
Yes, very
right?
much. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we're not, honestly, I was talking about this earlier today. We live in a culture that celebrates and legislates leadership in the wrong way, leadership
Mm,
that has been influenced by and informed by 6,000 years of military structure, leadership that has more to do with war and control and capitalism than real leadership. And all that leadership does, if you can call it leadership, and I don't, all that does is it creates and reinforces an ever increasingly fragile collective. And what I mean by fragile is highly defensive, not willing to look at the hard stuff, not willing to receive feedback, not willing to handle discomfort, right? And if you can't handle discomfort, then you can't handle feedback. If
mm,
you can't handle feedback, then you aren't trustworthy.
mm,
So it just creates this really, well, and look at where we are today, just don't, as you say, don't get me started. But that is the result of 6,000 years of what has been known as leadership, which in fact isn't leadership at all.
mm. Talk to me about bringing your corporates out to the ranch. If you've got corporates, then maybe there's a story there where people are really struggling. They're doing everything. They're really trying to keep control and they're running. Maybe it's their own business and they're just
Mhm.
running on adrenaline, not sleeping and trying to keep control, but everything is falling apart behind them. The whole,
Right.
mess is just behind them. Have
Yeah.
you had any experience along that line?
Yeah, plenty of experiences like that. One story, the horse is just, they're never going to lie, right? They're always going to say, yeah, you're lined up, or no, none of this makes, you're saying one thing, but you're being another.
Mm,
There was a tech company that had just been bought out by a Japanese firm, and they had come to my ranch sort of as a sort of team cohesion now post merger, meet the new CEO, meet your new kind of team members sort of thing. And there was a point where we don't start with this, but at some point, if they're with us long enough, then they'll have some time with the horse with a halter. And so we were at that stage, and there was the CEO had this horse haltered, and he was leading the horse. And this horse is this long, leggy, athletic, young thoroughbred, super shiny, you know, and even though the CEO had very clear instructions about how to lead, and even though everything had been really set up for him for his success, he did, of course, what he had been programmed to do his whole life, which was grab the lead rope, throw it over his shoulder, and literally drag the horse behind him. And the
Wow.
horse is like, like
Pulling back, going, no.
pulling back, like dogging along, right? And the whole team is watching this, and this is their new CEO, right?
Yeah.
And he's just literally falling on his sword in front of everybody. And somebody kind of turned to somebody else and said, "Does that remind you of anything?" Um, and in this business, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so it was just all there. And somebody out loud in front of the CEO said, "Is that horse like old and tired?" And I said, "Well, just look at him. Does he look old and tired?" He's just like sleek and like, and at that point, the CEO kind of stopped, and he kind of he saw that his team was watching him, and he's looking at the horse, and he became very emotional, which was
Wow.
beautiful, right? I
Yeah.
mean, just that, because
Mm.
he could have tried to save face.
Yeah.
At the very least, he could have like joked, right, to kind of dump that energy, and like it all could have been just funny.
Mm.
But he took it. He took the
Mm.
feedback. He took
Wow.
the feedback. And he kind of stood there for a second, and he looked at everybody, and he said, "This is how I do everything. This is how I do it. I feel like I know all the answers. I get out front, and I'm going to drag everyone behind me. And I take this partner who's clearly so capable, and I've turned him into a donkey."
Wow. What a huge awareness for him from him. Yeah.
Right? So, so many things happened just in that moment that, first of all, he became trustworthy because he was vulnerable,
Mm.
accountable, transparent, receiving the feedback, showing his learning edge, like all of that,
Mm.
which so many leaders are afraid to do in front of somebody else. And the team, I think, that moment engendered more trust and more spirit and
Mm.
more, connective tissue to that team than anything else they could have done. So that's just one example. And of course, once he kind of had that moment, then he was able to lead the horse from a better position side by side. And the horse is just like, boom, right there,
Yeah.
really, with all his spirit and all his beauty.
Mm.
Yeah. So, we do those sorts of things. We do a lot of different things with the horses, but I think one of the things that I try to do in the beginning through the connection to the land, the place, everything that's happening around the ranch. The ranch is on the unceded land of the Tasuki Pueblo people, the Native American people here. There are a lot of energies to this land that are very powerful. And there is just all these forests and all this wildlife that is around, and all these animals. And so my first job is to help people to disengage from Chronos and engage in Kairos.
Mm.
And not, we can learn from horses all we want, but until we understand that we are in kinship with them,
Mm.
that we are in kinship with the trees, we are in kinship with the rocks. It is not a feel-good kumbaya idea. We actually are of the same livingness essence of the rocks, of the dirt, of the smallest piece of sand. And that is, until we understand that, we're always going to be objectifying the natural world and observing it from a separate place. And that is always a place of fear, no matter how loving it feels.
Mm.
It's not until we come together, understanding that the kinship that exists intermolecularly. And so I find a way to transmit that without necessarily using words, because I don't want to go up against
Mm.
their conditioning, or that will then have them kind of blow off the work. So there's just a lot of somatic practices so that people are, that line between human and horse, that line between human and tree starts to get blurred
Mm.
quite literally.
I was going to ask you about your somatic practices and how they impact on the leaders that you work with. And so thank you for taking us there. When your leaders have been to you, how do you help them, support them moving forward as they go back into their life?
Yeah, this is the thing is that the neural pathways that have been worn in the old conventional way are deep. Those are deep ruts. And ideally, you're not just coming here for an afternoon thing. We have repeat exposure so that we can integrate what happened here at the ranch. I don't always have control about that. Sometimes companies will just have the budget for we're flying all the way to Santa Fe from Tokyo. We're just going to see you this once.
Mm.
But if I have my way, and I try to be as persuasive as possible because I want them to be very served, then we have monthly or bi-monthly
Catch up.
virtual calls.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of somatics that you can express
Mm.
right across the virtual spaces that help them to realign themselves with a different paradigm, a power with paradigm instead of a power over paradigm. And
Yeah.
this kind of leads into, culture change. How do we shift actual cultural understanding of our team, that it's not just a bunch of words on a poster, that we actually know what trust feels like.
Mm.
And we know how it feels if trust is at risk. And we know that if we drift, how do we then agree that we're going to shift back to other agreements so that we can rebuild the trust? Because otherwise, we're just going to go back to the old habits, right?
Yeah, very true. And I personally, coming from that facilitation training space and having had a riding coach for a lot of my life and
Mhm.
other business coaches, it's that constant, we go back into the doing because that's
Mhm.
how work is, and
Mhm.
we, react to what's coming at us, and
Mhm.
then we need to be reminded. And so having
Yeah.
that constant contact with your
Yes.
your people, or for me, as if I'm being coached, is a reminder that, oh yes, that's what I'm doing. And I've been embodying, just like yourself, for many years, the way we practice, and I
Right.
still go back to my old ways.
Absolutely. Me too.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would be wise to recognize the power of and
Mm.
not underestimate the power of that conditioning. It's hardwired in there.
Yeah.
It is hardwired, and some of that stuff is passed down generation to generation.
Mm.
So it's kind of humbling that, this isn't a one and done thing. This is the practice. The practice is living awake, living aware, being self-aware, telling oneself the truth, and having trusted allies around you that are going to give you
Yes.
feedback. And as a coach, I have a coach, and I would just never not have someone who's going to be that person who's going to challenge me or challenge my thinking or remind me of what I already know, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it's amazing to me that companies don't invest more in that kind of sort
Having a
of
coach.
awareness,
Yeah.
growth,
Mm.
professional development. Not like we don't need to know more frameworks. We
No.
don't need to know more, another disc assessment,
Mm.
another like, okay, but really let's actually really invest in self-awareness and commit to being the best humans we can be
Mm.
inside this workspace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And best doesn't mean the one who always achieves the best numbers. It's like, how are you interpersonally? How do people
Mm.
trust you? Do they feel safe in your company? Do they feel like they can be direct with you
Mm.
and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah. And
Hmm.
so often, I am hearing more and more leadership coaches are coming yet into workplaces, yet it is often to the C-suite in the executives, and it's not for the lower level leaders who probably need it as much as, if not more, than the C-suite.
I were to wave my magic wand,
Yeah.
it would be, I would want to empower, I would want to teach a man to fish kind of thing. So can the leaders embody these new cultures and then embody them in such a way that then it cascades down and they teach it and model it and teach it so that all across the organization it gets populated
Mm,
because of this evolutionary opportunity that's happening in the organization. Because if you just do mid-level management and in the other tiers, then they become frustrated that they're the ones being
yeah.
accountable, telling the truth,
Yes.
showing up on time, not multitasking in the meetings, like, but the boss is like showing up late, and
Mm.
so that doesn't work,
No.
right? So it has to be, it has to go across the organization.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. And I love that because everyone's holding everyone else accountable and
Yeah.
showing the way. And when, you do sessions, well, when I do sessions and I say to people, tell me about a great leader that you've had. And then
Mm.
when they share that about this person, you hear stories of how they were that leader as a horse. They were the quiet
Mhm.
leader who embodied it and just were able to, and they took feedback and they
Mhm.
understood, and they listened, they asked questions, and you hear all these beautiful stories. And that's what we want is that in that cascading example that you were
Yeah.
talking about, it's
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. We live in a larger zeitgeist where the opposite is rewarded.
Yeah.
So we have our work cut out for us, I think. I was talking to somebody the other day about how, so many sort of basic interpersonal skill sets are not taught in schools.
No.
And so many people don't develop emotionally past middle school. It's problematic. And how do we encourage people to stretch past sort of eighth grade ways of dealing interpersonally? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. For me personally, like I only grew because of pain.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what
And
made me grow.
and
That's
that's how people grow.
right.
They're either running from something or heading towards something, and the
Yeah,
pain is they're running away from that
that's right.
pain. Yeah.
Yeah, so the discomfort of becoming a parent and learning that I'm not as great a person as I thought I was, right? The discomfort of my daughter saying that thing about the horses, the discomfort of, hard feedback from a team or a business falling over, right? Or some folks with, especially those with enormous privilege, are often don't get that discomfort.
No.
All right, they get saved from it or they insulate themselves from that discomfort, and so therefore they don't grow. So it's an interesting space to roll around in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. As we're coming to a close, you're doing 2 consecutive Saturdays online course.
Yes.
Tell us about that. How to lead a transformative life.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, I was thinking yesterday, like what could I give to your audience that might be a really neat goodie? And it came to mind to offer your listeners this. How to Lead a Transformative Life is one of my online courses that is taught by me. And it really follows the blueprint of evolutionary intelligence and how we bounce forward in our lives, not just change, not just transition, but literally make an evolutionary leap in our lives. And what natural forces are innately in us that support us to make that leap, and how can we leverage those forces, and how do we watch out for ways we can sabotage ourselves and set ourselves back or kind of stunt our growth. It's a very kind of, roll up your sleeves and really get into the material so that you're more resilient in the face of transformation, and you're more in the driver's seat in some ways, that when disruption comes, that can be part of that transformative process, what you can do with that disruption and how you can leverage it to kind of be at your next level. So I'm proud of the work, and I'm giving your listeners an absolute free ride, complimentary,
Wow.
100% off. I think you'll put it in the show notes so
I
they can
will.
look. So there's a code EQUUS, which is my business name, EQUUS 100KW, and that will give you a complimentary space in the course. And I would love to see you all there.
Fantastic. Is it what date is it starting?
It's this fall, and it is Saturday, September 27th and Saturday, October 4th.
Fantastic. Brilliant.
Ah,
Kelly, it's been a beautiful conversation,
thank
and
you so much, Miranda.
I've really got a lot out of. I've realized that there is so much more in the body than
Yes.
what words can say. And sometimes, I feel something, I know something innately, and people ask me to describe it, and I'll come out with one word and I go, that's all I can come up with because it's this,
Mhm.
and I can't
Right.
describe it. And so that was what I was feeling when you were talking about it, because when we are connected,
Mm,
it's a being, it's a knowingness. And
yes.
you mentioned the Indigenous culture, I think you said, they know that, there aren't words, it's that knowing that when they're
Yes.
connecting. And I'm going, yeah, that's exactly what I've been learning in the last few
Yeah.
months. And yes,
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for articulating that. It's that is really where the superpower lies, is in that embodied knowing and being. And from there, from there, other things can happen, but they're informed in such a different way. So
yeah, yeah.
thank
But
you.
it's really difficult to verbalize though when you're there.
Hmm.
And if you're with
Hmm.
someone else and they go, well, what's happening? And ah. I think because I'm an introvert as well, so I'm not good at speaking on the spot. And so I have to think about it. So I'll go away and then I can go, oh, it was this. I
Yes.
can then interpret the words that came up. Yeah.
Yeah. And, also, Miranda, our language does not allow for,
Mm.
there are not words in the English language that articulate, because the English language is colonized, which separates. So, for example, Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote the book Braiding Sweetgrass, an Indigenous woman, and she talks about her native language is, you don't say a tree, you say the tree is treeing,
Yeah.
right? It's a verb because it is becoming in that moment. It is not a innate object. It is a verb,
Yeah.
so the language articulates the experience.
Mm.
So this is often why our language, it's hard to find words, because the words don't quite go there.
No, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose I could get off topic. When you're listening to your horse and your horse is speaking to you, it is not articulating in English. It,
Correct. That's
and
right.
and yes. Mm.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Anyhow, on that
Yeah.
note, it has been absolutely
Beautiful.
amazing
Thank
talking to
you.
you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah.
Great
And
pleasure.
thank you to
And
your listeners.
yeah, and show notes will have the link to the How to Lead a Transformative Life, and have more details on Kelly and her book, The Flying Lead
Flying
Change.
lead change. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and about your EQUUS experience. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
my pleasure. Thanks for joining me on the Reins of Leadership. Remember to lead with presence and influence with trust. Subscribe for more insights and find resources at mirindasmith.podia.com.